Welcome to Africa Gods Rising, a place where forgotten deities, ancient rituals, and hidden truths awaken once more. Here we journey deep into Africa's sacred past, uncovering the gods who ruled the skies, the rivers, the forests, and the underworld. Their voices were silenced, their stories buried, but now they rise again. Every beat of the drum, every flame of the shrine, every whisper of the ancestors is alive here. This is not just history. It is spirit, it is power, it is Africa. Reborn. You have entered Africa Gods Rising, and the gods are waiting. A stone lies silent, unmoving, ancient as the earth itself. To the casual eye, it is nothing but hardened matter, a fragment of land beneath our feet. But to Africa's ancestors, stones were never mute. They whispered, they carried memory. They bore the weight of the gods and the voices of the dead. In their cracks and their fall, in their patterns and their silence, stones spoke truths that no human tongue could dare utter. In shrines scattered across the continent, stones were laid in circles, placed upon altars, or thrown upon the ground. To the uninitiated, these were lifeless objects. But to the diviners, the custodians of mystery, they were living texts. Each fall was a word, each arrangement a sentence, each whisper a revelation. Bones, shells, and stones were not chosen by chance. They were chosen because they carried spirit, because in their simplicity they revealed the hidden. Why did the ancestors believe that such objects could speak? Because they understood a truth that modern eyes often forget. Creation itself is alive. No matter is empty. Every stone, every shell, every fragment of bone is part of the divine fabric woven by the Creator. To cast them in divination was not superstition, it was dialogue. The gods spoke through nature, and the ancestors listened through ritual. Across Africa, from the Ifa oracle of the Yoruba, where palm nuts and chains fall to reveal verses of destiny, to the Efa of the Igbo, where sacred marks and stones revealed law and justice, to the bone-throwing ceremonies of the Zulu, where ancestors arranged destiny in patterns only healers could read. The oracle was the breath of truth. It was not about predicting fortune like a game. It was about communion, about discovering the will of spirits, the judgment of ancestors, the design of destiny itself. Colonial powers once laughed at these practices, calling them primitive. Yet even in their laughter they feared them, for they knew the oracle was not merely symbol. It was authority. It could decide wars, enthrone kings, heal sickness, or expose betrayal. And though many shrines were destroyed, many priests silenced, the stones have never stopped whispering. This is the journey we now begin. A journey into Africa's sacred oracles, into the whispering stones that reveal what eyes cannot see and ears cannot hear. For the stones still speak, and those who listen will hear the voice of eternity. Long before scrolls or scriptures were written, Africa already carried its scriptures in the earth, in bones, in stones, in shells. Oracles were among the oldest languages of the continent, predating kings and kingdoms, predating temples of stone. They were born from the recognition that the world itself speaks. Every leaf that falls, every bird that cries, every ripple of water is a message from the divine. And so the ancestors asked, "If nature speaks, who among us can listen?" Thus began the sacred calling of diviners, the interpreters of the unseen, the birth of the oracles. In the oldest stories, oracles were gifts from the gods themselves. The Yoruba say that Orunmila, the Orisha of wisdom, descended with Ifa, the sacred system of divination. He was there when destiny was written, and so he alone could teach humanity how to read it. The Igbo tell of how Chukwu, the supreme god, gave humanity Afa so that mortals might consult him through sacred marks and signs. Among the Zulu, the ancestors taught healers to cast bones, for bones carried the spirit of the dead and could speak what the living could not. These were not inventions of men. They were revelations. Systems given by gods to ensure that humans never walked blindly in a world filled with spirits. Diviners as interpreters. The oracle itself was never seen as human work. The diviner was not the source of truth, but the interpreter. Men and women chosen by calling, often through dreams or afflictions, were trained to hear what others could not. Their tools, stones, bones, shells, chains, were not random. Each object was infused with meaning, each one a doorway into the invisible. When cast upon the ground, they fell not by chance but by guidance, arranged by the unseen hand of gods and ancestors. To consult an oracle was not a light act. It was a covenant. Farmers asked when to plant, warriors asked whether to march, kings asked whether to sit upon the throne, families asked how to heal their sick. Every step of life was tied to the oracle's voice. Objects as sacred vessels. Why stones? Why bones? Why shells? Because these are the oldest and most enduring of nature's gifts. A stone, silent for thousands of years, carries memory of creation. A bone, once alive, carries the breath of ancestors. A shell, shaped by the ocean, carries the mystery of Yamoja's womb. These objects were never lifeless. They were sacred vessels, capable of holding the voices of gods. The fall of stones, the scatter of bones, the lines drawn upon sand were not accidents. They were cosmic writing, signs to be read by those trained to listen. The diviner's work was to read patterns the way a scribe reads letters. The difference was that here, the writer was the spirit world. The oracle as balance. The earliest role of the oracle was not entertainment, but balance. In a world where sickness, war, and misfortune could strike without warning, the oracle gave direction. It identified the cause of illness, whether it came from offended ancestors, broken taboos, or malicious spirits. It revealed the will of gods in matters of justice, punishing liars and vindicating the innocent. It offered sacrifices as remedies, guiding the people to restore harmony with the unseen. Thus, the oracle became central to African spirituality because it was central to survival. Without it, people would walk blind through a forest filled with spirits. With it, they could walk with confidence, knowing they were aligned with divine order. The living memory. Even today, the origins of African oracles remind us of a truth deeper than time, that the world is alive and communicative. Stones whisper, bones speak, shells sing, rivers answer. What the modern eye dismisses as objects are, in truth, sacred instruments of dialogue between humans and eternity. The oracle was born from this recognition, and it has never ceased to guide those who remember. Among all the oracles of Africa, None is as vast, as intricate, and as enduring as Ifa. To the Yoruba people, Ifa is not simply divination. It is the very language of destiny, the wisdom of the universe given form. It is both science and scripture, both ritual and philosophy. To speak of Ifa is to enter into one of the greatest spiritual systems humanity has ever known. The descent of Orunmila. The Yoruba teach that when the world was created, the Orisha Orunmila, also known as Ifa, stood by Olodumare, the supreme god. Orunmila was present when destiny, Ayanmo, was assigned to every soul before birth. He alone heard the secrets of each person's path, each joy and each trial. When humanity descended into the world, Orunmila followed, carrying with him the wisdom of the gods so that mortals would never be lost. This is why Ifa is sacred. It is not a human invention, but a divine memory. Through it, people can access the knowledge Orunmila preserved from the beginning of time. The Babalawo, priests of wisdom. The custodians of Ifa are the Babalawo, literally fathers of secrets. Trained through long apprenticeship, they memorize thousands of verses, prayers, and myths known as the Odu Ifa. The Odu is not just text. It is a living library containing the wisdom of gods, ancestors, and creation itself. Each verse is a story, a parable, a piece of guidance. When a person comes with sickness, misfortune, or uncertainty, the Babalawo does not give answers from his own mind. He consults Ifa, using divination tools to reveal which Odu speaks to the seeker's situation. His task is not to invent truth, but to interpret the message Orunmila has already written. The tools of Ifa. The two main instruments of Ifa are the Ikin and the Opale chain. The Ikin are sacred palm nuts. The Babalawo holds them in his hands and manipulates them in a series of casts, marking the results on a divination tray, Opon Ifa, with sacred powder. The marks create patterns that correspond to verses of the Odu Ifa. The Opale is a divination chain with 8 half-seeds or shells. When cast, it falls into configurations that also correspond to Odu verses. Each pattern is a key, unlocking a passage of divine wisdom. It is said there are 256 primary Odu, each containing hundreds of verses. Together they form a body of knowledge so vast that no single Babalawo can memorize it all. The wisdom must be learned, transmitted, and remembered across generations. The nature of the Odu Ifa. The Odu Ifa is not only about predicting the future, it is about diagnosing the present and aligning the seeker with their destiny. A verse may reveal that misfortune comes from neglecting ancestors, from broken taboos, from spiritual imbalance, or from cosmic tests. The Babalawo interprets, prescribes rituals, and offers sacrifices, Igbo, to restore balance. The verses are deeply poetic. They tell of Orisha myths, of moral lessons, of hidden truths. A single Odu might include dozens of parables, each layered with meaning. The seeker must reflect and apply the wisdom to their own life. Thus, Ifa is not fortune-telling, but guidance, an intimate conversation between gods and humans. Ifa in daily life. In Yoruba society, Ifa was central to every decision. Before a child was named, Ifa was consulted. Before a king was crowned, Ifa was consulted. Before wars, marriages, or major journeys, Ifa was consulted. It was the trusted bridge between the seen and unseen, ensuring that human actions aligned with divine will. Even today, in Nigeria, Cuba, Brazil, and the Caribbean, millions still practice Ifa. In Santeria and Candomblé, Orunmila is honored as a supreme Orisha of wisdom, and Babalawo continue their sacred role as interpreters of destiny. UNESCO has recognized Ifa as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity, a testament to its enduring importance. The power and mystery of Ifa. What makes Ifa so profound is its belief that destiny is not fixed but dynamic. The Odu reveals possibilities, but sacrifice, prayer, and alignment can alter outcomes. In this way, Ifa is not fatalism but empowerment. It teaches that life is a dialogue between humans and the divine, and that every choice echoes across eternity. To sit before a Babalawo is to sit before thousands of years of memory, myth, and spirit. The palm nuts that fall are not random. They are Orunmila's voice, whispering what must be remembered. For the Yoruba, Ifa is not just a ritual. It is the very breath of the universe made audible. Among the Igbo of southeastern Nigeria, destiny was not left to chance, nor was truth entrusted only to the words of men. The gods provided a system of divination known as Afa, a sacred code of marks, signs, and revelations. Through Afa, the Igbo could hear the will of Chukwu, the supreme god, and understand the balance of the universe. Yet alongside this system of daily guidance existed one of the most feared and powerful oracles of Africa, the shrine of Ibini Ukpabi, better known as the Long Juju of Arochukwu. Together they reveal how central oracles were to justice, order, and survival in Igbo life. The sacred system of Afa. The Afa oracle was the heartbeat of Igbo spirituality. It was consulted for nearly everything: farming, marriage, illness, naming children, or uncovering hidden causes of misfortune. Diviners, known as Dibia Afa, were the interpreters of this system. They used sacred objects, cowries, kola nuts, stones, or carved figures, to reveal patterns that were read as messages from the spirit world. The Igbo believed that every misfortune had a cause, whether spiritual, ancestral, or moral. A child's illness might come from neglected ancestors. A man's failure in business might result from broken taboos. A woman's barrenness might be caused by spiritual blockages. Through Afa, the diviner identified the source and prescribed sacrifices, rituals, or reparations. The Afa was not fortune-telling, it was diagnosis. It was a spiritual science, a method of aligning human lives with divine order. Its purpose was not to satisfy curiosity, but to restore harmony between humans, ancestors, and gods. The Long Juju Oracle of Arochukwu. If Afa was the daily guide, the Long Juju of Arochukwu was the supreme court. Located deep in a forested gorge, this shrine was regarded as the final voice of truth. Chiefs, kings, merchants, and entire communities sought its judgment when disputes could not be settled by human means. The shrine was dedicated to Ibini Ukpabi, a powerful deity whose presence was said to fill the entire gorge. To approach his oracle was to risk death, for lies and guilt could not survive before him. The accused would be taken to the shrine, where elaborate rituals determined innocence or guilt. Some accounts tell of tunnels and chambers through which the accused were led. The innocent emerged alive, declared vindicated by the god. The guilty never returned, swallowed by the shrine's mysterious depths. To the Igbo, this was not trickery. It was justice delivered by the gods. The Long Juju was feared because it was incorruptible. Kings could not bribe it, warriors could not intimidate it, and liars could not escape it. Authority and fear. The Long Juju's reputation spread across West Africa. Traders swore oaths before it. Rulers sought its blessing before taking thrones. Its authority extended beyond Igbo land, drawing people from neighboring regions who trusted its judgment more than any human court. At the same time, it was feared. Families wept when a relative was taken there, for the shrine revealed not only guilt, but also secrets. Some say that those who entered could hear voices, see visions, or be struck down by unseen hands. For generations, the oracle stood as one of the most powerful symbols of African spirituality, law, and divine justice. Colonial destruction. When the British arrived in Igbo land, they were terrified of the Long Juju's influence. They called it a pagan court and accused its priests of cruelty. By the late 19th century, they destroyed the shrine during colonial campaigns, forcing diviners underground and branding Afa as witchcraft. Yet even in silence, the memory of the Long Juju lived on, whispered in stories, feared in dreams, and honored in secret prayers. The legacy of Afa and the Long Juju today, Afa divination is still practiced among the Igbo, though often hidden behind closed doors. The Long Juju shrine itself lies in ruins, but its legacy endures. Elders speak of it as a place where truth once walked among men, a reminder that justice was once divine, not political. Together, Afa and the Long Juju show us that the Igbo did not separate spirituality from daily life. Destiny, healing, justice, and truth were all tied to the whisper of oracles. And though colonialism tried to bury them, the stones of Afa and the silence of Arochukwu still whisper in the memory of the people. If in Yoruba land the Orisha speak through palm nuts, and in Igbo land truth is revealed by Afa, then in southern Africa it is the bones that carry the voices of the ancestors. Among the Zulu, Xhosa, Sotho, Tswana, and many others, healers known as sangomas or inyanga throw bones, not as dice of chance, but as sacred instruments alive with spirit. To watch the bones fall is to watch the ancestors speak, for each piece, each scatter, is a message from the unseen world. The calling of the Sangoma. No one chooses to be a Sangoma. The calling chooses them. It begins with dreams, visions, or sickness that defies ordinary cures. A spirit, often an ancestor, seizes the chosen one, demanding that they accept the mantle of diviner. If the call is ignored, the sickness worsens. If accepted, the initiate enters into training under an elder Sangoma, learning chants, rituals, and the art of bone casting. This training is not academic. It is spiritual apprenticeship. The bones are not tools, but living relatives. To touch them is to touch history, to hold the bridge between past and present. The sacred bones. The word bones is not literal alone. A Sangoma set may include actual bones of animals, but also shells, stones, coins, carved figures, pieces of wood, or other sacred tokens. Each piece carries symbolic meaning. A bone may represent health, a shell may represent the ancestors, a coin may represent wealth, a stone may represent obstacles. When thrown upon a mat, their arrangement reveals the message. The Sangoma does not merely read the pieces, but listens to the ancestors speaking through their positions. A bone falling apart from the others might signal isolation. A shell turned upside down might reveal ancestral displeasure. A cluster of tokens may signify conflict. To the Sangoma, every fall is divine speech. Ancestral voices. The bones do not speak alone. The Sangoma spirit guides interpret them. The diviner may enter trance, singing, chanting, or drumming to call the ancestors closer. Clients sit before them, asking about sickness, lost objects, marriage, or misfortune. The Sangoma listens, not with their ears but with their spirit. The ancestors whisper and the bones confirm. Unlike Western fortune-telling, bone divination is not about predicting random futures. It is about diagnosis and prescription. If a person suffers constant illness, the bones may reveal it comes from angry ancestors who have been neglected. If a family faces poverty, the bones may show broken taboos. The Sangoma prescribes remedies, rituals, sacrifices, or herbal medicines to restore balance. The role of the Sangoma in society. The Sangoma is not only a healer but also a counselor, priest, and judge. They guide chiefs in political decisions, advise families in disputes, and prepare warriors for battle. They heal not only individuals but entire communities, for the voice of the ancestors is considered higher than that of any chief. Because of this, the Sangoma is feared and respected. Their words can bless or curse, heal or expose. To sit before a Sangoma is to sit before the ancestors themselves, whose judgment cannot be escaped. Colonial persecution and survival. When colonizers and missionaries came, they feared the Sangomas deeply. They called them witches, sorcerers, and servants of the devil. Laws were passed to outlaw bone throwing, and many diviners were imprisoned or driven underground. Yet the practice did not die. In rural villages, bones still whispered. Even in silence, the Sangomas carried on, because the ancestors never ceased to call. Today, despite centuries of persecution, Sangomas remain central to Southern African spirituality. In South Africa alone, it is estimated that 70 to 80% of the population consults traditional healers alongside modern doctors. Modern power of the bones. In the present day, Sangomas have become more visible. Some practice openly, blending ancestral rituals with modern healing. Others carry their bones into urban centers, serving clients in cities where ancestral ties remain unbroken. And in times of crisis, illness, political unrest, or family misfortune, the people still turn to the bones for guidance. The bones continue to fall, and in their fall, the ancestors continue to speak. For in Southern Africa, it is not only history that survives, it is presence. The Sangoma reminds the living that the dead are never silent. The bones are their tongues, the mat is their scripture, and the diviner is their voice. In the heart of Central Africa, where forests stretch endlessly and rivers coil like serpents, the oracles of stone and spirit whispered with a voice unlike any other. Among the Congo, Luba, and other great peoples of this region, divination was not only about destiny, it was about survival in a world alive with spirits. Here, stones, carved figures, and sacred bundles known as nkisi became vessels through which the unseen made itself known. Nkisi and the spirit world. In Congo traditions, the Nkisi was more than a charm. It was a living container of spiritual force. Crafted with wood, feathers, shells, bones, or stones, the Nkisi carried the presence of spirits who could heal, judge, or punish. Diviners, known as Nganga, were the interpreters of these powers. They cast sacred objects upon mats, read the positions of stones, and entered trance to hear the spirits speak. The Nkisi were often driven with nails or blades, each strike representing a plea, a curse, or a judgment. In this way, the community believed that the spirits marked their presence in the world of men, making the invisible visible. The forest as oracle. Beyond the objects themselves, The very forest was regarded as an oracle. Among the Luba people, sacred groves were spaces where ancestors gathered, and diviners used stones or sticks to map out the will of the spirits. A sudden sound in the forest, a bird's cry, or the fall of a branch could be interpreted as a sign. The diviner's role was to listen to the forest itself, for the spirits were not silent. They lived in every rustle of leaf and echo of drum. Divination boards and stones. The Luba also used divination boards, flat wooden tablets carved with symbols of kingship and ancestry. Stones or shells were cast upon these boards, and their patterns interpreted as messages. The oracle was not only about healing individuals, but about legitimizing rulers, guiding migrations, and settling disputes. A king could not be enthroned without the confirmation of diviners, for the spirits had to approve before the people could obey. Stones themselves were treated as embodiments of truth. Smooth river stones, carried into shrines, were believed to hold ancestral voices. When cast, their scatter revealed the unseen forces at work in a person's life. The oracle, as healer and judge Central African oracles, did more than reveal. They acted. If a person was sick, the oracle diagnosed whether the illness came from offended ancestors, witchcraft, or natural causes. If a crime had been committed, the oracle judged guilt or innocence, often with terrifying accuracy. For those who lived under its gaze, the oracle was law itself, higher than chiefs or elders, for it was believed to be the mouth of the ancestors. Colonial distortion. When European colonizers encountered Nkisi and Nganga, they misunderstood them as fetishes or idols. Missionaries described diviners as sorcerers, branding their practices as demonic. Shrines were destroyed, Nkisi figures were stolen into museums, and forest oracles were cut down with axes. But even in the shadow of colonial suppression, the Nganga continued. In villages and hidden groves, the stones still fell, the forest still whispered, and the ancestors still answered. Survival and memory. Today, the legacy of Central African oracles lives on. Nkisi figures can be found in museums, stripped of their spiritual essence but still radiating mystery. In rural communities, Nganga continue to serve as healers, diagnosing sickness with sacred stones and bones. Even in the diaspora, echoes of these practices survive in Afro-Caribbean religions, where spirits are invoked through objects, chants, and ritual bundles that carry the same ancestral power. Central Africa reminds us that the oracle is not only a system, but an environment. The forest itself is a shrine. The stone itself is a witness. The figure itself is a vessel. Here, the whisper of the oracle was never confined to a tool. It was the voice of the land itself. When colonizers marched into Africa, they did not only come with guns and laws, they came with new gods. To break the backbone of the people, they sought to silence the oracles, for they knew the oracles were more than rituals. They were voices of authority. A diviner's word could crown a king, decide a war, or heal a nation. To the colonial mind, this was dangerous. To missionaries, it was heresy. And so the attack began. Demonization of the diviners everywhere across the continent. Diviners were labeled as sorcerers and witches. The Babalawo of the Yoruba, the Dibia of the Igbo, the Nganga of the Congo, the Sangoma of the Zulu, all were condemned as agents of the devil. Oracles were described as fetish practices, their rituals dismissed as superstitions. Missionaries taught that consulting an oracle was opening the door to hell. The sacred language of Ifa was called blasphemy. The throwing of bones was called witchcraft. The shrines of stones in Nkisi were smashed as idols. Yet this demonization only revealed how much power the colonizers believed the oracles truly had. They feared them because they could not control them. Legal suppression. Colonial governments did not stop at words, they made laws. In British Nigeria, ordinances were passed banning consultation of the Long Juju oracle and prosecuting diviners as criminals. In South Africa, the Witchcraft Suppression Act of 1957 made it illegal to practice bone divination openly. In Congo, Catholic missionaries worked with colonial officials to confiscate Nkisi figures and burn them in public squares. These laws were not about civilization. They were about control. If the people no longer trusted their oracles, they would be forced to depend on colonial courts, churches, and rulers. Suppressing the oracles was a way of replacing African authority with foreign domination. Resistance and secrecy. But the oracles did not vanish. They went underground. Diviners practiced in secret, often at night, away from the eyes of missionaries. People still whispered to the stones, still poured libations at rivers, still consulted the bones when sickness or disaster struck. Some adapted, blending old practices with new religions. Baptism in water carried echoes of river cleansing. Christian prayers were whispered over shells that still carried the voices of the Orisha. In many places, Islam's ablutions before prayer became layered with ancestral meanings. The oracles disguised themselves, but they never died. The legacy of suppression. The colonial attack left scars. Many Africans grew ashamed of their own traditions, taught to see them as backward or evil. Some shrines were abandoned forever, yet the memory of the oracles was not erased. Elders carried it in their stories. Families kept sacred objects hidden in corners. And in the diaspora, among the enslaved in the Americas, the oracles survived in new forms, disguised within Catholic saints or hidden in Afro-Caribbean rituals. The colonizers believed they had silenced the stones, the bones, and the shells. But they were mistaken. For how can you silence the ancestors? How can you outlaw the voice of the gods? The oracles only waited, whispering in silence, until the time of their rising once more. Though colonizers sought to silence them, the oracles of Africa never truly died. Today, in cities and villages, in forests and festivals, in Africa and across the diaspora, the stones still whisper, the bones still fall, and the shells still reveal. What was once pushed underground has resurfaced, proving that ancestral wisdom cannot be erased, it only waits. Ife in the modern world. The Yoruba system of Ifa has not only survived but spread. In Nigeria, Cuba, Brazil, and the Caribbean, Babalawo continue to cast palm nuts and opal chains, interpreting the sacred verses of the Odu Ifa. In Brazil's Candomblé and Cuba's Santeria, Ifa is practiced with the same reverence as in Yoruba land, the Orsha Orunmila, still invoked as the custodian of wisdom. UNESCO has recognized Ifa as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity, ensuring its survival as a global treasure. What was once condemned as witchcraft now stands honored as one of the most sophisticated systems of knowledge in the world. The Afa and Igbo shrines. Among the Igbo, Afa divination is still alive. In villages across southeastern Nigeria, Dibia Afa still consult stones, cowries, and sacred markings to reveal truth. Families come to ask about illness, fertility, or disputes, just as their ancestors did centuries ago. Though the shrine of the long juju of Arochukwu lies in ruins, the spirit of Ibini Ukpabi has not been forgotten. Elders still speak of its incorruptible justice, and in whispers, some say the god still answers in ways unseen. The bones still fall in southern Africa. In South Africa, Zimbabwe, and across the region, sangomas and traditional healers still throw the bones. Despite colonial bans, today nearly 80% of South Africans consult traditional healers at least once in their lives. Modern professionals, politicians, doctors, and business leaders often sit before sangomas in secret, asking guidance from the ancestors. In towns and cities, you can still hear the rattle of bones falling onto mats, still see healers entering trance as they listen to voices carried by the ancestors. Nkisi and Central African healers. In the Congo and Central Africa, the Nganga continue their work. Nkisi figures, once demonized and stolen into museums, remain active in villages, where healers still use them as vessels of spirit. Stones, shells, and carved objects are read as they always were, revealing causes of misfortune and prescribing rituals to heal. Even as Christianity has spread across the region, Nkisi traditions persist in the background, blended with new forms but never abandoned. The diaspora echo. In the diaspora, oracles live in transformed but recognizable forms. In Haitian Vodou, diviners still read shells and hear from the LWA spirits. In Cuba and Brazil, Santeros and Candomblé priests still honor the Orisha with riverside rituals, using divination to reveal destiny. Even in the United States, African Americans reconnect with ancestral systems of bone-throwing, Ifa, and Vodou, reclaiming what slavery tried to strip away. A living voice. What unites all of these practices is their resilience. Oracles are not relics of a forgotten past. They are living voices, still guiding people through the struggles of the present. Whether in a Lagos shrine, a Zulu village, a Cuban temple, or a New York diaspora circle, the stones still whisper, the ancestors still speak, and the oracles still guide. The journey of the oracle is not a story of the past, it is a story of continuity. The stones, the bones, the shells, the sacred shrines, they have never been silent. From Yoruba land to Igbo land, from the Congo to the Zulu plains, from the shores of Brazil to the forests of Haiti, the oracles still speak. Their voices may have been forced into whispers during the colonial age, but whispers are powerful. They linger. They survive. They wait until the world grows quiet enough to hear them again. To the ancestors, the oracle was more than a ritual. It was a covenant. It was the assurance that humanity was never alone, that guidance was always present, that the gods and the ancestors had not abandoned their children. Through Ifa, through Afa, through bone casting and Nkisi they spoke. Through the whisper of stones and the patterns of shells, they revealed. And even now, they continue to answer, because creation itself cannot be silenced. The colonizers may have carried away sacred figures to museums, may have outlawed rituals and demonized priestesses, but they could not erase the memory in the people. For the memory was not only in human minds, It was in the land, in the rivers, in the stones themselves. When the bones fall today on mats in southern Africa, when shells are cast in Havana, when palm nuts strike the divination tray in Lagos, the ancestors return to speak once more. The lesson is clear. The world itself is alive. Nothing is mute. Stones carry memory, bones carry breath, shells carry the sea. To consult them is not superstition, it is dialogue. It is communion with forces older than kings, older than empires, older than time itself. And so, as we close this journey, we are left with one truth. The stones still whisper. They whisper of destiny and healing, of justice and memory. They whisper of gods who were silenced but not destroyed, of ancestors who were buried but not forgotten. They whisper to those who dare to listen. The oracles of Africa are not gone. They are here. They will always be here. And if you lean close enough, if your spirit grows still enough, you will hear it too. The eternal whisper of the stones.